Hi, everyone. This is Shirley here with Slow Fashion Season, and thank you for joining today's webinar. This webinar is part of the Slow Fashion Saturday series, where we educate ourselves, speak to industry professionals, and find new ways to take action as a crowd. In today's talk, we will explore what the SDGs are and how they're related to fashion. I'm delighted to have our two speakers, Tricia Carey from LENZING and Kerry Bannigan from Conscious Fashion Campaign. So thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you, Shirley.
Yeah. Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much. Let's jump right in. Kerry, what are the SDGs?
So the SDGs, or for those that are not familiar, are also termed the Sustainable Development Goals. These are 17 goals that provide a blueprint for us to have a better planet for not just the earth, but the people also here. With these 17 goals, there's actually 169 targets, and we'll get into those more. It seems a little overwhelming at first, but the main goal of these 17 goals is how we can work forward to a much more prosperous place. And what does that look like to be a fairer and better future for all? And the for all is the most important part here, where we look at what we are doing and the global challenges we are facing. And this was pre the pandemic we are in right now. The Sustainable Development Goals were actually adopted in 2015 by the United Nations member states. And as I mentioned, they look to address the global challenges that go from poverty to inequality, climate, prosperity, peace, and justice. And as we continue this conversation and also see the work that Tricia represents, you'll start to understand how, as we look at these, they are so interconnected between us as humans and also the fashion industry.
Thank you, Kerry. And Tricia, same question.
Yeah, so for the SDGs, as Kerry mentioned, that they're the framework, and I look at it as being so important for the apparel industry because it mixes both the environmental and the social side. So for LENZING, we've been reporting on the SDGs for the past 3 years and highlighting our goals of what we're working towards. And I can go into detail in some of our initiatives later on. And I wanted to highlight when I first heard about the SDGs, and Kerry's heard me say this before, it sounds like they're a disease or something until I had the full explanation on it. And it was actually through Textile Exchange, which is an organization that supports sustainable textile development. And there I worked on a report with the committee at Textile Exchange led by Caterina Conte, and it was with KPMG, and they developed a report called Threading the Needle, and that was 3 years ago. And this report highlights how the SDGs are related back to the fashion and apparel industry. And because, with 17 SDGs, it's very easy to get overwhelmed on where do I begin? And then people throw up their hands and say, well, I don't know if I can do anything. And so what I love about the SDGs is you can find some ways that they work into your business. It brings this awareness, and then you can start to measure and develop from there.
Great, thank you. Well, that kind of good segue into our second question, Tricia. How are the SDGs related to fashion?
Well, SDGs in fashion, I think what we're looking at right now is, a great reset, especially related to consumption. So SDG 12, responsible production and consumption, is really pivotal for the apparel industry. We look at also the issues around climate action, which is very big, SDG 13 for the apparel industry. And I think overall, when you look at the size and scope of the apparel industry, the trillions of dollars that go into it, the number of workers, the people that are impacted by the apparel industry, this is where, we have such a great way to make a difference from everything that we do in the apparel industry. Mm-hmm. And like I said, I think there's a lot of emphasis on reducing from an environmental standpoint, but I think now we have an even greater chance to impact on the social side of what is happening. And we see how interconnected we are. And when factories aren't getting paid, what does this mean for the welfare of the people? And the whole connection between East and West that is really so important right now.
Yeah, good points. Kerry, what are your thoughts on this topic?
Well, as always, I wholeheartedly agree with Tricia, and it's so true. And if anything, now the pandemic has made us realize, and it's unveiled more, that consumers and your audience can now also relate and understand that I think before wasn't being shown. And when you look at what do the SDGs do and how do they relate to fashion, actually emphasizing and echoing more what Tricia was saying, for me, the shock was when we were seeing all these reports that were coming out across the industry, but as well at the United Nations. And, just to put this into some numbers here, the fashion industry is worth approximately $2.4 trillion. It employs, touching on Tricia saying, the amount of people, over 60 million people, and 80% of that workforce is women. And when you stop and you think about that and the influence and the power that this industry has, and if it could develop and work towards the Sustainable Development Goals framework to do better, the impact of the lives that it could really better, and again, coming back to the word fairer, future for all, would be incredible. And the reality is, out of the 17 goals, when a business looks at these in the fashion industry, or even a consumer, but I am going to take it from the business standpoint right now, a lot starts to resonate with them. Is it goal 5 for gender equality? Is it then that you're jumping to goal 10 for reduced inequality, especially with what we're looking at now that COVID has brought awareness to us? And the reality is the industry has had for a very long time and is somewhat built on reduced inequality, but we are at this moment now where we're deciding it's wrong, we need to do more about it on the masses. And I think we're also locked in a society that is perpetuated by fast, now, immediate. What does that mean? I want a dress for a party tomorrow, and I talk pre-COVID, no one should be going to parties right now. But, you could go online and get it. And you're thinking, okay, that's wonderful service, but there is a human and a whole element chain here of humans providing that to you. And do we need that? And so we now need to look at how we can just, again, echoing goal 12, how can we consume and produce more responsibly so that we're not just looking after the planet, we're actually looking after our people, our neighbors, our peers. And when you say, how are the SDGs related to the fashion industry, it's more of how are they not? There is not one SDG that is not interconnected and touched on by the fashion industry.
Yeah, that's great. So how can companies support these SDGs in their business model? And can you give an example?
Well, I'm going to jump in quickly because then I'm going to shine the spotlight on LENZING, because they're an incredible company to champion an example of actually implementing and these practical solutions for the Sustainable Development Goals. On my side, what I see when I talk to companies is businesses of all sizes. If you're in the audience and you're a small company or a solo entrepreneur, please do not think that you do not have the influence and the assets to actually make a difference. You do. We see it in different ways. It could be from reporting, it could be auditing. There's also how it can be used in communications. Some people might just pick 1 or 2 of the Sustainable Development Goals to start because it resonates with their mission, their brand, and also it's realistic for the region that they're in or the region that they want to help. Is it localized on how they want to give back? One thing I do say is when we see this in communication, internally and externally, we have to really ensure that it is responsible messaging. There is a lot of power that lies in the messaging that a company shares. Not going to get into greenwashing whatsoever. That is not my point. It's more so about when you decide to take on the responsibility of the Sustainable Development Goals, you also have a responsibility to message that. And it's in a positive way. Bring your consumers on the journey, but also bring your employees. You cannot have a sustainable, focused, or purpose-driven company embracing the SDGs if you don't educate your consumer, your employees. It's not just about the consumer education. Your employees need to understand, what does it mean as a culture in the business? What is it for the forward thinking of the company? And Tricia and the squad over at LENZING are a prime example of the various ways you can actually use the Sustainable Development Goals in your business.
So Tricia, your perspective on this and how can companies support
Sure,
the SDGs?
So for LENZING, and for people who don't know LENZING, we're a $2.2 billion company. We convert wood into fiber. So all we do is sell fiber. Our fiber brand name is Tencel, and it's for Tencel lyocell or modal. We also make viscose, which we brand as EcoVero. We have 7 manufacturing facilities around the world. So as Kerry said, it doesn't matter the size of your company. Actually, we're small in the scheme of man-made cellulosic fiber producers, but we do take on a high level of responsibility in what we're doing, educating, as Kerry said, within our organization as well as within the industry. And some of the SDGs that we've been focusing on, and I'll just start in order and highlight briefly, SDG 12, which is what we were saying before, responsible consumption and production. And that has to do with how we manufacture our fibers so that we are, utilizing the least amount of energy, chemical, waters, and any kind of savings that we can have there. The fact that when we manufacture Tencel lyocell, it's a closed loop production process, so we reuse the solvent. And we also have come up with innovative products like our Refibra technology, which upcycles cotton waste in order to manufacture a new fiber. So those are some ways. And then what we do is we work through all of our customers, the whole value chain, in order to make sure that there's an understanding of the responsible innovation that we provide. We've been doing a lot around SDG 13, which is climate action. The apparel industry is starting to have a high awareness and to set some goals. So last year, LENZING has approved science-based targets. Now, science-based targets, if you don't know about them, it's great, look them up online. There are 411 companies globally across all industries that have approved science-based targets. And this is where how companies can reduce their carbon emissions and have real scientific data behind what they're doing towards this. And it's very collaborative because you can also receive feedback from other companies and how they're achieving their targets as well. Additionally, in 2018, LENZING was a signatory of the UNFCCC, which is the Fashion Charter for Climate Change. And this stated that companies are looking to reduce their CO2 footprint by 30% by 2030. LENZING has actually set an even higher commitment of going to 50% reduction by 2030 and actually to go net zero by 2050. So these are some very ambitious goals that require us to have investment and be very collaborative, which leads me to SDG 17. We do a lot around partnerships for the goals and, working with our partners who are mills, working with brands. These are ways that we connect throughout the whole supply network. And I'm specifically saying network and not supply chain because it's about bringing everyone together. And as a fiber producer, I can support what a brand is doing and how they're communicating. And these types of partnerships, I feel, really will make a difference in the future. Additionally, SDG 15, which is life on land, because all of our products come from wood, we maintain a high level of responsibility around making sure that we're not purchasing any wood or pulp from ancient, endangered, or rainforests. And here we work collaboratively with Canopy Group, which is an NGO supporting responsible forestry, as well as certifications for forestry like FSC and PEFC. So those are just some of the SDGs, but as Kerry mentioned, you can touch on each one of them. And actually we did put together a document where we are highlighting each SDG and our contribution as a responsible company. So I can always provide more information around that. But those 12, 13, 15, and 17 were the goals that I wanted to highlight today.
I would love, if you don't mind, I would also love to add, especially for this demographic, who I'm sure is very social media savvy and, entrenched in the digital world, is Tencel did something very cool for Earth Month as well, which I would love you to share more about, Tricia. And for me, it was so interesting that you get a company that is usually so B2B focused, actually took the task of creating beautiful imagery, digestible information, data that could be understood by the consumer, and taking it to digital, the online, the media, and then also advertising side of things, the subways and things like that. And I think that is not an easy task, and it's not something that you also see every day. You do find that divide where you have got manufacturers and supply over here, and the consumers are left to be receiving any communication via the brand or maybe the retailer only. And I think what Tencel and Lenzing have done, and I think now 2 consecutive Earth months, it was just a very creative and innovative campaign to show that there's so much education around impact, and to use social media as the medium to do that.
Thanks, Kerry. Yeah, so that was a really fun campaign, and you're right, we've done it for 2 years. In 2019, we connected the campaign not only digitally, so we would work across our social media channel as well as our brand partners. In here, what we did was also make it a like campaign. So if you liked it, then we would donate $1 and there would be commitments. And we matched the money that our brand partners were contributing. So we actually raised enough money. We worked with One Tree Planted, and we raised enough money to plant enough trees that would be larger than another Central Park. So it was a really fun project to do. And then this year in 2020 for Earth Month, and it had some twists and turns without having any physical events. So at least we had already planned on having a digital campaign. But here we looked, as Kerry mentioned, to educate at the consumer level, bring our brand partners to the forefront, and you can see which brands we work with. You can go to tencel.com and see where to buy, and all of our brand partners are listed there, and you can click through to their websites. And so when we did this for Earth Month in 2020, we highlighted a connection back to the SDGs or any commitments that our brand partners are doing. Again, let's raise this awareness, and let's make sure people are supporting purchasing from brands who have this in mind and who are thinking of all of the SDGs.
Great, thank you. So our final question for our audience here at Slow Fashion Season, because we are in our 2nd month of our campaign now, where we want our community to make conscious choices for 3 months. Now, knowing about the SDGs, Tricia, what advice do you have for the everyday consumer? What can they do to support the SDGs?
What they can do, I think, in connection with what you're doing and the challenge that you have for the 3 months, I mean, this is all about responsible consumption and production. And I think it's very easy to get sucked into a sale, or, you can't go anywhere, so you'll buy something else online. Mm-hmm. But I think, you're highlighting that there's different options now. And I think we need to consider how much we're consuming. Where is it coming from? Who is making my garments? Ask those questions, do some research. I think that's very important. And I pledged for the challenge, which is a big challenge for me because I do enjoy shopping. Although during the pandemic, I have to say, it's just not the same to go to stores, to have to wait in line, to have the inconveniences, or wearing the mask. Traffic patterns in the stores have changed. And so I've even questioned for myself, what do I really need? My lifestyle is very different now. And I think we will continue to see that our lifestyles will change after we're through this period. And so the pandemic pause has really allowed me to reflect on how much I need. And being in the apparel industry for years, it's very easy to get enticed by, this new collection came out, or I know the designer who developed this program. And to get sucked into that. But, as I look at my closet, I really feel it's very much of the 80-20 rule, where I'm only wearing 20% of my clothes 80% of the time. And so what do I really need? And this is one way of thinking of the SDGs and considering, what do you need to consume right now? And what impact does that have? I think also as consumers, we need to consider what happens to clothes when we are no longer using them. How are we donating them? Is there, a charity that will take them back? Is there someone else you can pass it off to? I know you encourage, clothing swaps. This is a big thing. How can we keep clothing in circulation longer? And if we do need to dispose of it, how can we do that responsibly? There's 50 million tons of textile and apparel waste every year globally that's discarded. I mean, that's enormous. So is there another way to keep our textiles, our clothing from being thrown out? And also to think about what fibers, what they're made of, because for our fiber, for Tencel, it is biodegradable and compostable. So you don't have issues where you have with synthetic fibers that are either, staying in landfills that do not biodegrade, or worse, you have issues around marine pollution that's happening. So I think, this is where, as an average consumer, you can still make a difference. And there's some wonderful apps around your impact on the SDGs, and you can start to track things. There's some wonderful education tools too. If you want to learn more, I took this wonderful course on Coursera, and it was on the SDGs. It was out of Erasmus in Rotterdam. It was a wonderful 6 weeks of lectures around the SDGs and how interconnected they are. It was very business oriented, but I still feel it gave another level of understanding and what businesses are doing around the SDGs.
Amazing. Kerry, do you have any advice for consumers today?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to echo there what Tricia was saying, for me that stands out is the 80-20. I think a lot of people are discovering, you're only wearing a select amount, so how much do you actually need? And I really enjoyed how you added this year that if you do need to do anything, make sure you look locally, build locally, support locally, move the money in your economy, and make sure you're helping those local businesses to have a sustained community. And so the responsible consumption is key, but I also just want to take it a bit beyond the fashion side, because you can actually work with the Sustainable Development Goals throughout many touch points in your life. And I think Tricia covered an excellent amount on fashion there, especially for the pledges of your challenge and those wanting to come along. And I think if you're home and you're thinking, okay, I'm an individual, I am in the civil society, I'm a global citizen, I don't have a business, what can I do? I'm already doing this with a challenge. If you want to take it a bit further, it's like how you can look at swapping a bath for a shower. What can you do with your food, the packaging of your food? How Tricia was describing what you do with fashion, you can do that with the food. How are you donating, getting rid of what you don't want to eat anymore? Are you composting? There is so much. And when you look at the SDGs, again, you don't have to be a business to make a difference with these. Each of us as individuals and the choices that we make in our life, where we are spending our money, how we are spending the money, the people that we're supporting. And when you come to look at anything that you want to purchase, how is that company behaving with its employees, or how much can you find out on what they're doing? And I think that's critical across anything that you want to purchase in your life.
Amazing. Well, thank you both so much. Sadly, we have to wrap up this talk, but it has been very insightful and very educational. I want to thank you both for your time today. And thanks to everyone who tuned in to watch. I hope today's webinar have prepared you with information to make conscious choices for the next 3 months. So thank you both again so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Shirley.
Yeah.